10 seconds of silence fill the courtroom before the sound arrives. The gavel falls once. The chamber breathes out. Life without the possibility of parole. 99 years. The number is said clearly, as if weighed on a scale. He does not smile now. He used to. He used to tilt his mouth at cameras and let a thin laugh ride the air. Now there is only a steady gaze on the edge of the defense table, a white line of knuckles pressed together. Your Honor, I need to speak. A mother rises from the gallery, voice steady, hands trembling. The judge turns, and the room turns with him. The court reporter lifts her eyes. The deputies step once and wait. We freeze on an earlier image. A rectangle of night, a suburban porch, a doorbell camera with a timestamp. 10:12 p.m. 9 seconds that changed everything. A small figure crosses the frame, and a larger figure follows, patient and practiced. By the end of this story, you will know why an unblinking lens, a phone in a pocket, and a habit of contempt built a bridge to this sentence. We rewind to the night before the silence. We return to the town whose lawns glow with sprinkler mist and porch lights. The map says Willow Junction. The law says a county of common pleas. The sky says late fall and a dry wind. On a cul-de-sac with sycamores and orderly mailboxes, a house breathes out a faint music from a kitchen speaker. Inside that house, a teenager studies vocabulary cards and tries to believe in his own small momentum. His name is Jordan Avery, 16. Adopted at 9. A sophomore who runs cross-country at dawn and works a weekend shift at a bakery. His foster name is now his name, seamed into school forms, insurance forms, a library card. He keeps it safe in the wallet he bought with tips. He texts his aunt 2 words most nights, home safe, because she worries in a way he secretly enjoys. The oven clock reads 9:58 p.m. The doorbell chimes once. The camera by the frame pigments a blue oval on a moving face. The boy rises. He thinks of plates in the sink. He thinks of the dog that is still at the vet and will come home in 2 days. He does not think of danger because the neighborhood has ironed danger out of its corners. Jordan opens the door. The air carries leaf mold and a trace of fuel. A woman stands on the welcome mat under the porch lamp. She wears a gray cardigan and a lacquered smile. She says his name as if it belongs to her. Elaine Mercer, 39. Foster mother to 3 over the last 6 years. Adoptive mother to 1 12-year-old boy in a different county. She has served on 2 parent-teacher committees. She brings casseroles when houses flood, and she returns library books on time. She also keeps notebooks, in perfect columns, of what people owe her and what they will owe her. Jordan does not know the notebooks exist. He knows only her voice from a year ago, when she offered rides and brought him a winter coat. "Are you alone?" she asks. He says, "I am fine. Thank you," and tries to steer the moment toward polite closure. She says, "I need to drop something off from the agency." She steps forward, and the camera records the angle of her body and the way her hand is hidden by a tote. At 10:12 p.m., the porch light flares slightly as a moth hits the lens. 9 seconds hold steady on faces and a threshold. 9 seconds that will later be slowed by attorneys and explained by experts. The call to 911 arrives 6 minutes later from a neighbor who heard an impact and a cry. The first officer steps through the archway of hedges at 10:23 p.m. He notes in his body mic a broken planter's edge and a pattern on the floor. He secures the house. He asks dispatch for medical units. He says the words, "suspected assault without drama," because drama harms clarity. The boy is alive, barely. The woman is not in the room. There is a faint perfume near the door that smells like orange rind and antiseptic. The officer states the time, the position of the body, the positions of objects, and he waits for detectives who carry cameras and envelopes and tape. By midnight, the doorbell video is in the custody of the responding sergeant. He signs the first chain sheet on the sidewalk under a light bar. He moves the device into an evidence bag with a seal that crisps shut. He notes the serial number of the camera and the time the owner consented to release. The boy is moved to a hospital with a trauma team. The emergency physician lists injuries in neutral terms and calls the on-call social worker. The detectives step through the rooms, feet in paper booties. They speak little. They let the lens speak. A phone buzzes on the counter. It displays a missed call from a contact saved as Mom Elaine. It displays a text with a single line. Open the door. The sergeant notes the phone, isolates it in a Faraday pouch, calls for a digital warrant, and logs the time on body cam and in a notebook. At 2 a.m., the on-duty judge signs a narrowly tailored warrant for the phone, the doorbell archive, and the cloud backups tied to the subscriber email. Everything in this house has a number now. The numbers are how the truth will move. At dawn, a car parks 2 blocks away. The driver sits with hands on the wheel until the light changes from steel to diluted blue. It is Elaine. Her hair is neat. Her eyes are red from a night of not sleeping. She dials a number and then ends the call. She walks into a police station at 7:12 a.m. with a tote bag. She tells the desk officer she wants to cooperate. An investigator walks her into an interview room with low ceilings and an air vent that hums. He reads her a careful script. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to the presence of an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. She says she understands. She signs a form. She nods when asked if she wants to talk. She does. She talks smoothly at first. She says she visited to drop off paperwork from the agency because they were correcting a birth certificate line. She says she stood outside. She says she saw a shadow. She says she left when he asked her to. She does not know the very device outside his door has preserved an answer. She does not know his phone preserved the command. The detective pivots to the screen. He shows her the frame. 10:12 p.m. 9 seconds. The tote. The step. The hand. Elaine blinks. She asks for water. She says she is under stress. She says she wants to do the right thing. He nods and says the room is recorded, and her rights still apply. He suggests she tell the truth, while the truth can still hear her voice. Her mouth makes a small dismissal shape. She says the boy fell. She says he was clumsy. She says he lost balance when the dog jumped. The detective waits. Silence does not accuse. It invites pressure to redistribute. She fills it with more words. At 8:26 a.m., she asks, what will happen if she tells everything? At 8:27 a.m., she says she wants a lawyer. The interview ends. The recording ends. The paperwork begins. A patrol unit brings her to holding. A prosecutor on call reviews the affidavits. The judge on duty signs a warrant for arrest on probable cause of aggravated assault. The hospital calls at 9:10 a.m. The boy is gone. The charge will change. The law changes when the living stop. News vans idle by noon near the entrance of the station. A headline writer chooses a phrase that bites, and a producer circles footage of a woman in a gray cardigan. A defense attorney named Marcus Hill receives a call from a relative of Elaine and drives to the station with a spiral pad and a practiced face. Marcus is precise, patient, and loyal to procedures that protect everyone. He requests access. He requests a copy of the warrant. He requests his client. He tells her not to speak. He tells her that silence is not guilt. He tells her that she will be treated as an adult at every step, even as the state decides what to file. The county prosecutor is Dana Cho. She has built a reputation on simple summations and a talent for letting defendants narrate their own ruin. She arrives with a team at 2 p.m. and asks one question of the lead detective. Do we have the chain? He says we do. She asks the second question. Do we have the midpoint? He says we do. She means the moment where a case ceases to wobble and lines straighten. The midpoint sits at 10:12 p.m. on a porch, and at 8:27 a.m. in a room where a request for a lawyer closed the tap. Dana files an initial complaint. She asks a juvenile intake officer for the file on Elaine's prior foster cases. She asks for agency notes under subpoena. She tells her team, "This will be a transfer case in reverse form. The state will try a caregiver as an adult for conduct against a minor with malicious intent." The first hearing unfolds in a room with wooden pews and buzzing exit signs. Elaine wears county orange and a composure like shellac. The judge, Harold Benton, asks for names, and each attorney speaks into the record with clear vowels. Elaine pleads not guilty. The judge sets no bond due to risk of flight and risk to the community as defined by statute. The calendar tightens. Counsel agree to a preliminary hearing date and to discovery schedules with rolling productions. The press waits outside and records a moment when Elaine sees a camera and lets a corner of her mouth flick up. A phrase is born, smirking foster mother. It will live for months and echo into the jury pool. Marcus files motions. He challenges the seizure of the phone as overbroad. He challenges the admissibility of a statement made before counsel's arrival. He argues the video lacks context and that a shadow can be a trick. He requests a change of venue. He requests the doorbell device for independent imaging. Dana answers with inventory sheets and timestamps, with a playback that shows 9 seconds without gaps, with an affidavit from a digital analyst on hash values. The judge denies the venue motion without prejudice and sets a hearing on suppression. He speaks evenly, and his eyes do not flinch. In the weeks that follow, the town keeps mowing lawns. The bakery where Jordan worked places a photograph near the register, with a small votive next to a stack of napkins. His aunt writes a victim impact note she cannot read yet, and she folds it into a drawer with gum wrappers and a church bulletin. Marcus meets Elaine in a narrow attorney booth and takes a history. She rehearses the benevolence of her adulthood. She catalogs hours of service and lists children she hosted when agencies needed beds. She sighs, as if that sigh is currency. She says Jordan was difficult and suspicious, skilled at sulking, hungry for boundaries he pretended to hate. Marcus does not nod. He does not frown. He writes in tidy lines and asks about that night. She says she brought forms. He asks why she did not schedule a meeting in daylight at the agency. She says the agency is slow. He asks about the tote. She says she keeps everything in totes. He asks about a mark on her wrist, documented in booking photos. She says, "A cat did it." He knows the jury will hear the room tone of her justifications, and they will map it onto motive, like vellum. He hires a psychologist, Dr. Lila Grant, who studies adolescent development and caregiver stress. She is careful, precise, and measured to a millimeter in public speech. She meets Elaine for 3 sessions and reviews records of past placements. She notes patterns of control, conditional attention, and a need to be seen as indispensable. Her draft report is grim and technical, and might have been a tool, but it will be blunted by what is coming. On the day of the suppression hearing, the courtroom holds an audience of quiet faces. Dana speaks first, builds a spine of facts, and threads the warrants on it. Marcus rises and says the word overbroad, as if it were a warning sign on a cliff edge. He cites a case from a neighboring district. Dana replies with the particularity of the affidavit and the consent from the device owner. The judge rules. The evidence stands. Elaine looks down and smiles to herself, as if she solved a small puzzle. A camera captures it. The image travels, and the image does its work. The case transfers to a trial docket within 3 months. The aunt of the boy chooses to speak at sentencing, if there is one. She practices in the mirror and stops halfway every time. The calendar squares fill with names. Juror summons go out. The clerk prints badges and counts exhibit stickers. On the first day of trial, the judge asks a set of questions to find a clean 12. Can you follow the law? Can you put aside sympathy? Can you wait for evidence? One man says he cannot. He has a teenager at home and cannot be fair. He is excused. A woman says she can and will. She is seated. Opening statements arrive like two maps of the same city with different street names. Dana says facts will lead them. Marcus says, wait and watch context. Dana begins with the call, the doorbell, the phone, the tote, the wrist, the timeline, the 9 seconds. Marcus promises the jury will hear about stress, about a system that bends adults until something snaps, and about ambiguity where certainty is claimed. The first witness is the neighbor who dialed. Her voice is concrete, exact. She marks time with oven clocks and weather apps. She did not see faces. She heard a knee hit tile, a gasp, and a whisper of words that sounded like, not again. The second witness is the first officer. He speaks of entry without flourish. He explains gloves, booties, photographs, and an urge to rush that training holds back. He is not a poet. He is a ledger that breathes. His ledger entries draw a clean route. The medical examiner speaks clinically, and each sentence lands like a nail tapped in gently. She avoids adjectives. She places cause of death in a basket of neutral nouns. Dana keeps her questions thin. Marcus asks about alternate mechanisms. She answers in ranges and probabilities, and his eyebrows lift in small, hopeful moves. Then, the digital analyst walks through the world inside the phone. He authenticates chain of custody. He speaks of hashes and checksums and the banality of devices that tattle. He reads out the string, open the door, at 10 p.m. He reads a deleted draft at 9:52 p.m. that says, almost there. He describes a geofence request, answered with a set of pings that bracket the porch at 10:12 p.m. Marcus asks if a spoof could fake a location. The analyst concedes theoretical possibilities and then measures them against the totality in this case. 9 seconds on the doorbell align with 9 seconds of audio captured by a neighbor's security light. A faint jingle of a bracelet appears in both. Dana looks once at the defense table, where a bracelet sits in an evidence bag. Marcus offers that bracelet was a gift from a child once grateful. The room breathes in the subtext, and then lets it go. The lead detective returns to explain the interview. He plays the part where Elaine speaks smoothly, and then asks for a lawyer. The judge instructs the jury that a request for counsel is not evidence of guilt. Dana knows the instruction is correct and still counts on the human mind to remember tone. Marcus cross-examines hard on the timing of the right script and the pauses in the room. He plants seeds for appeal. He knows his job. The midpoint arrives when the judge denies a motion for a directed verdict and the case proceeds with a spine intact. Dr. Grant takes the stand for the defense in the second week. She paints a picture of a caregiver in chronic stress, of a need to control, of a personality shaped by scarcity and praise economies. She does not excuse harm. She contextualizes it. She uses careful words and pauses where a less careful person would reach for ornament. Dana cross-examines with a single tool. She reads snippets from agency emails where Elaine insists on compliance and the removal of privileges for small infractions. She asks about the notebooks. Dr. Grant says the lists suggest an accounting mind. And under pressure, such a mind can mistake people for ledgers. The jury listens. They hold the shape of a woman in their heads, and it is not the shape Marcus hoped to cast. In the gallery, a man sits most days. He is Elaine's father, a quiet machine operator with a back that aches at night. His name is Elaine Mercer. He stares at the lighting fixtures when the testimony grows tense. He keeps a cap in his lap, and he prays without telling anyone. On the morning of the aunt's statement, the courtroom changes temperature. She steps up with a paper in her hand. She breathes, and the room breathes with her. She tells the story of a boy who made coffee too strong and apologized for it as if it were a crime. She tells the story of shoes by the door, lined up like soldiers, because order calmed him. Her voice catches when she describes the empty chair at breakfast. She does not describe injuries. She describes absence as if it has weight. Elaine looks away and then looks back, and for the first time, her face is not a mask. It is a calculation that cannot complete. After the aunt sits, Raymond stands. He does not speak. He cannot yet. He will. He will at the end. For now he sits. The jury files out for lunch. The judge watches them go with a gaze like a carpenter, measuring a beam. In the afternoon, Dana calls a final witness. A child welfare supervisor who testifies to the rules, the check-ins, the allowed and the forbidden. She says no unscheduled contact after hours without agency consent except in emergencies. She says delivery of paperwork is never done at 10 p.m. Marcus objects to speculation. The judge sustains. Dana pivots and reads the policy manual aloud, a dry drumbeat. The gallery is a sea of faces and a raft of silence. Even silence has a texture on days like this. Marcus rests, and the court adjourns for the day. He walks to the holding cell to see Elaine and prepares to advise her not to testify. She says she will. He says she should not. She says the jury needs to see her heart. He says they have seen enough of her face. She insists. He calculates risk. He cannot stop a client who chooses to speak. Morning brings her to the stand in a fitted blazer and a voice tuned to soft. She tells the jury she wanted to help a boy who was drowning in a system of forms. She says she tried to bring order where there was disorder. She says she loved rules because rules keep people from breaking. Dana lets her explain. Dana lets her paint herself, and then Dana holds the frame steady and reveals the cracks. Why did you go at 10 p.m.? Why did you send open the door? Why did you hide your hand in a tote? Elaine says the tote was heavy. She says the hour was a mistake. She says she panicked when he stumbled. Dana asks whether the bracelet in evidence is hers. Elaine says, yes. Dana plays the audio from the neighbor's light where a small jingle sounds at second 4. The room is a held breath. The judge leans forward and then leans back as if the bench could tilt. Dana asks whether she told the truth in her first interview. Elaine says mostly, it is a word that cleans nothing. Dana asks whether she apologized to the aunt. Elaine says she sent a message through counsel. Dana lets that hang. The defense rests the next day. The jury will receive closing arguments tomorrow. In the quiet between sessions, Raymond visits Marcus in the hallway. He says 4 words. I need to speak. Marcus knows this sentence has weight. He asks to be on the list for allocution if there is a verdict. Marcus nods and says that decision will be the judge's. Overnight, clouds press low. The courthouse in the morning looks like a ship. The jurors look like sailors who did not expect this voyage. Closings are 2 roads to a single place. Dana begins with the 9 seconds and the bracelet, and the phone, and the tote. She tells them not to search for evil. She asks them to search for disregard. She says this case is about a person who believed rules were for others. Marcus asks them to see stress, to see a system that asks too much of tired people, to see a stumble magnified by cameras and headlines. He asks for mercy in the form of reasonable doubt. He asks them to remember the medical examiner's ranges. The judge reads instructions that sound like a manual, and are, in fact, a compact with logic. He reminds them that sympathy is not a scale. They leave with binders and return before dinner. They have spoken enough. They have drawn a line, and they have named it guilty. The word is small. The effect is not. The judge thanks them and releases them from service with a dignity that wraps the room in quiet. Sentencing comes a week later to allow for filings and statements. The aunt stands again and reads now without stopping. She says Jordan's shoes will stay by the door until she knows what to do with them. She says the house still waits for the dog to return. She says she forgives nothing and no one can ask her to. She says she will not let this story make her cruel. Dana asks for life, without the possibility of parole. She asks for a sentence that says, rules apply to the rulemaker too. Marcus asks for life with parole. He asks for the court to acknowledge a life that could be useful behind walls. Judge Benton speaks last. He speaks of order and of consequence, of the public trust granted to caregivers, of the private ledger that replaced a heart. He says the words, 99 years without parole. He says them as if returning a borrowed object that must never have been loaned. The gavel falls. The room absorbs it. Elaine does not smile. Raymond rises. Your Honor, I need to speak. The judge allows him 1 minute. He says he failed to teach his daughter that the world says no and means it. He asks the aunt to forgive him. She stares at the floor. She cannot. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He nods as if she answered aloud. The deputies move. The door closes. The first real fear appears at last, on a face that used to wear certainty like perfume. The story ends where it began, with silence, numbers, and a lens that never looked away. We return to the porch at 10:12 p.m. to understand the 9 seconds that became a spine for a verdict. The video is still, unbothered, and loyal to what it saw. The frame does not widen for emotion. It does not narrow for excuses. It totals. A figure in a gray cardigan shifts her weight. A hand held low rises. A shoulder angles. A second figure, slight, opens space with courtesy. The threshold remains what it is. A line people cross to enter or leave. Law knows thresholds. Jurors know them too. On the audio glitch, a metal chime flickers. The cadence is the bracelet cadence that a neighbor's light also caught from another angle. 2 devices, 2 separate chains, 1 small rhythm. The state does not need more. It has enough to begin. The defense urges the jury to think of alternate routes. He speaks of a slip-on tile and the treacherous geometry of wet leaves. Geometry matters. Statistics matter. But the law moves forward when patterns lock and cannot be teased apart without breaking common sense. In the week between verdict and sentence, motions rise, like surf, and fall again. Marcus files a memorandum asking for a new trial in the interest of justice. He argues the headline, smirking, "Foster mother poisoned the pool." He attaches social media samples like shards in a plastic sleeve. Dana answers with juror questionnaires that show disinterest in local media, and with voir dire transcripts, where each seated member affirmed neutrality. The judge reads both and declines the invitation to relitigate a trial that did what trials do. Meanwhile, the aunt writes a longer statement at her kitchen table. It is not a speech. It is a ledger of the humankind. She lists birthdays and firsts, last day of middle school. The sweater he never wore because he said it made his neck itch. The coffee he made too strong. She adds a line that says the house will not be a museum. She will open the windows every day and not let air thicken around the absent. Raymond sits in his one chair and gathers sentences he never imagined saying in public. He is a man who preferred the quiet arithmetic of machines. He decides to speak not because it will change the sentence, but because it might adjust the dignity of this ending by a degree. The morning of sentencing arrives with a gray sky like felt. The courtroom hums at a frequency of restraint. The judge enters, and the hum lowers. He has the file, thick with the work of months, years compressed into paper and staples. Dana is exact. She does not triumph. She does not need to. The judgment itself is sufficient theater. Marcus is solemn. He has done his best. He has mapped every alternative and found that the main road was still the road. Elaine is brought in. She glances once at the gallery, and then drops her eyes to a place on the table that will, in memory, hold a permanent dent. The aunt reads. The timing of breath soon steadies her. The room holds. The court reporter makes a river of keystrokes. Marcus rises after and asks the court to remember two things: utility and human remainder. He says even broken tools can be useful. The judge regards him with a compassion that never bends the law. Compassion is not leniency. It is clarity with clean edges. When the number is spoken, it is a number that removes the horizon. 99 years is a legal phrase and a public message. It tells a county that trust is a contract and not a vibe. It tells caregivers that power is alone with audits. It tells Raymond that his task is now to live near a building with bars and still be a father. It tells the aunt that the court knows the price was not abstract. After, outside, the sky releases a thin rain that dots the plaza. Reporters stand under umbrellas and say into cameras that closure arrived. But closure is a word for paperwork. What arrives is a new system of days. Raymond walks around the block twice and returns to a bench. He sits. He watches the doorway where deputies usher people like vectors. He thinks of teaching his daughter no as a full sentence when she was 9. He thinks of a bracelet he bought as a birthday gift once, and how metal keeps its own counsel. Elaine rides in a van toward a state facility. She watches fields pass and speaks to no one. She counts light poles the way children count license plates. Inside the prison, an intake nurse asks questions in a voice built to survive repetition. Allergies, medications, prior attempts. A counselor explains the classification process, the program forms, the indigent kit. Words fold into other words, and the day compresses to a graphite smear. In a house across town, a kitchen timer goes off, though nothing is in the oven. The aunt forgot to cancel it. She laughs once, and then sits because laughter destabilizes her ribs. She sets Jordan's library book on the table and opens it to find a late fee printed on a paper lip. She decides to pay it and add $1, because $1 makes a sound when handed over. Meanwhile, lawyers move to appeals. Marcus files notices to preserve issues on the phone warrant, the admission of the audio from the neighbor's security light, and the refusal to change venue. He orders transcripts and waits for the court reporter's stacked boxes to turn into bound volumes. He writes a letter to Elaine that begins with the words, "We will continue." Dana opens another file in another case and does not confuse victories with nourishment. She eats a salad at her desk and calls a detective about a different doorbell, a different timestamp. In the appellate brief, Marcus writes about the 9 seconds and suggests the court below overestimated their evidentiary weight. He argues the cumulative prejudice of headlines. He writes in active verbs and controlled passion because appellate judges respect craft. Dana counters with the word totality often and the phrase harmless error once. She argues the outcome would not change with any single exclusion. The panel schedules arguments for the spring. The courthouse will again be a ship and people will again be sailors. Back in the county library, a librarian sees the aunt at the counter and waves away the fee. The aunt thanks her and leaves the $1 anyway, as a donation. At night, the town returns to sprinklers and porch lights. 9 seconds still live in the cloud. They will live there longer than anyone in this story. Raymond writes to his daughter. He tells her he will visit when the schedule allows. He tells her he will not carry excuses into the room. He tells her that if she wants to speak, she will speak. And if she wants to sit, he will sit too. He ends the letter without advice. In prison, Elaine learns the topography of schedules, counts, and the microeconomy of courtesy. She is polite to officers and correct with inmates. She does not speak of the case. She holds her jaw before sleep and tries to reconstruct a childhood that does not end at a lecture. A counselor assigns her to a class about accountability. The word tastes like chalk at first, and then becomes a rhythm. She writes in a workbook that agency without empathy calcifies into tyranny. The sentence is true. It lives on paper. Outside, the aunt attends a school board meeting because Jordan cared about a library budget. She speaks once, briefly, and sits down. Change does not roar. It ticks. Months turn. The appellate decision arrives in the form of a calm document with numbered paragraphs. The panel affirms. They find the warrants were particular enough. They find the audio admissible given the foundation. They find publicity managed through voir dire. Marcus drives to the facility to tell Elaine face to face. He does not like delivering news like this by mail. He sits across glass and chooses nouns carefully. She nods. She asks, what comes next? He explains post-conviction, relief options, and time limits. He will file what he can file. After the visit, he sits in his car and breathes with his face in his hands. He is a lawyer who believes work matters, even when outcomes do not fold gently. Dana, in another building, declines an interview request about the case. She believes the record exists for a reason, and she will not annotate it for headlines. Judge Benton returns to a docket of motions and divorces and property disputes and remembers that justice is not spectacle. He writes an order in a case about a fence line. He is as precise there as he was in imposing a number that erased a horizon. On the anniversary, the aunt leaves a note on the porch where 9 seconds live. She writes, thank you to a lens she once resented. She writes that truth needed a witness without nerves. Neighbors hang a small wind chime. It rings at odd hours, and nobody minds. It does not jingle like a bracelet. It does not accuse. It notes. The bakery keeps a tip jar with a strip of tape on the side that says for a library card fund. People put in coins and folded bills. Funds become cards and cards become books. Raymond attends a church service and lights a candle. He keeps his head down when sermons aim like arrows at people like his daughter. He is there to practice staying. Elaine writes a letter to the aunt. She says she is sorry without explanation. She does not ask for reply. She understands that asking is another form of taking. The aunt reads it once and puts it away. She will read it again when the house is quiet and the dog is home. The dog came home. Life makes small reparations without notice. Time carries the case into a shelf. It remains there for students and writers and insomniacs who need to understand how thresholds work. The doorbell company upgrades its cloud. The new terms of service are longer and kinder. Lawyers everywhere file fresh motions, and judges everywhere write fresh orders. 9 seconds remain unchanged. They do not inflate with legend. They do not shrink with shame. They are what they were. In the end, when people speak of the case, they do not say monster. They say human. They say consequence. They say contract. The county that watched itself on screens has learned to speak about duty without the gauze of sentiment. The courthouse continues to be a ship. People board, disembark, and sometimes sink, but most are carried from one side to the other intact. The last word belongs to the judge, though he does not speak it aloud. He writes it in an order you have not seen. The word is enough. Enough to say the world without consequences was an experiment and it is over. Enough to say rules are welded to care, not opposed to it. Enough to say the ledger that replaced a heart has been closed. And the first word belongs to a lens that stared at a threshold and did not look away. It is a word without vowels. It is a rectangle that remembers. 10:12 p.m., 9 seconds. A county measured itself against them and found its line.